Hello and welcome to this London South East and focusIR investor webinar. My name is Sarah Lowther and I'll be chairing the next hour when we'll be hearing from two companies, which are Pulsar Helium and Eurasia Mining. The format, each company has 30 minutes divided into 15 to 20 minutes for the presentation, and the remainder is time for Q&A, where you, the audience, get involved by putting your questions in the Q&A feature on this platform. Now, if your questions aren't answered, don't worry, because they will be passed on to the companies. And stay till the end, because we have got a very important poll that we want you to give answers to. Well, to our first company now, and it's Pulsar Helium, founded 4 years ago, listed on the TSXV in 2023, admitted to AIM last year. The company's business is to find the commodity they say we all rely on, which is helium. I'm delighted to be joined by the co-founder, president and chief executive, Thomas Abraham James, who joins us now. A very warm welcome to you, Thomas.
Thank you very much for having me, Sarah. Hello, world, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in and hearing the Pulsar Helium story. So here we are, Pulsar Helium. I always like to start with this slide, so it really puts us into perspective what it's all about. And so this is actually from last year, where we drilled at our project, Helium project in Minnesota in the USA, and the Jetstream #1 well. And what we see here coming out of the wellhead is not water. What we see is gas, and we see helium-rich gas. And that was a big moment for the company, certainly that when we made that subsurface discovery, or reconfirming the original discovery from beforehand and getting extremely high concentration of helium. So it's really, we're the first mover in this project. We're not in a location which is being drilled excessively like many other gas fields have. We are the first mover there, and we've got off to an incredibly exciting start. Disclaimer that I encourage you all to read, and an overview. So yes, I just talked about our Topaz project, which is the one in Minnesota in the USA. And also we have a second project, which is the Tunu project in Greenland. That is also a primary helium project. But today, most of the emphasis will be on Topaz, because purely that is a more advanced project. So primary helium, what does that mean? Primary means that helium is the primary economic driver. At the moment, the majority of the world's helium is produced as a byproduct of hydrocarbon production, so natural gas. Not ideal, because that doesn't give a great deal of flexibility for helium production, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So news flow. So we've just recently completed drilling the Jetstream #2 well, which is next to the one that I showed in that first slide. And then we also deepened the first well also. And so now we have well cleanup and testing soon to commence. Myself and other senior members of the company, we're invested heavily into this. So we own about 38% of the issued share capital. And we're also quite happily signed up to quite a lengthy escrow arrangement as well. So certainly have firm belief in the long-term potential of this company, and indeed the commodity helium as well. And really the right jurisdictions. So the USA, it is the world's largest consumer of helium. And what we have seen is supply there dwindling. Helium is notoriously difficult to transport, so domestic security, domestic supply is imperative for something like helium, which really does like to leak and disappear into the atmosphere. And as for Greenland, it is one of very, very few helium occurrences in Europe as well, so where it is on the critical list for the European Union. So a corporate snapshot here. So we are listed in 3 different jurisdictions. So if you're in the UK, we're on AIM. If you're in Canada, we're on the TSXV. And if you're in the USA, we're on the OTCQB. So I've made this slide slightly UK-centric, given that the majority of the audience will be joining from the UK today. So earlier this week, share price of 28.5p. And so that gives us a basic market capitalization of just over £38 million. So the cash position here, we put in US dollars, which is what our accounts are in, and that's from our last financial reporting period with 3.8 million. And obviously we spent some of that money since we've deepened Jetstream 1 and drilled #2 also. Major shareholders. So a major shareholder number one is AB Crescent out of the Netherlands, so a financial investor. And then it's our chairman, Neil, and then myself. And other founders have about 18%, and the public shareholding float is about 51% of the company's issued capital. So it is very tightly held. So myself, geologist background, I've been in the helium industry now for over a decade. Joined with me by my colleague Neil Herbert, financial background, and has been associated with many successful companies. Dan Bryan, our CFO, Doris Mayer, who's the Chief of Compliance, John Ferrier, who used to be the CEO of Gulf Keystone Petroleum, London listed, and oil production in the Middle East, and then Brice Loren, who represents our major shareholder. We've also got a strong technical team as well. We've got Brad Cage, our VP of Engineering. So he's in charge of the reservoir and really defining the work program that needs to be implemented in order to get this into production as quickly as possible and as methodically as possible as well. But rich experience there. Michael Sturdy, our operations manager. So he's been working with drill rigs for close to 2 decades now in numerous continents. And then we've got Nick Schofield, Professor Nick Schofield, who is an expert in igneous and petroleum geology. Now, this is key. Nick, for us, is a very, very strong member of our team, and that's because our reservoir, where the helium is in Minnesota, it is an igneous reservoir. And that experience that he brings with oil and gas in igneous reservoirs is really crucial. So why bother with helium? Well, it's definitely not just about party balloons. So it's all about technology. So the major one is semiconductors. If you're going to fabricate a semiconductor, you need to have helium. The other ones that we hear about frequently in the news is now space launch. In order for the fuel tank to maintain pressure as the launch occurs, helium is used. MRI scanners for magnets to superconduct, you need helium. The long and short of this is that as we get more advanced technology, data centers, fusion reactors, how do we keep things cold that generate a lot of heat and consume a lot of electricity? This is where helium comes in. And what we're seeing is that every week there are new articles about new applications for helium. So we certainly see demand staying. Looking at the US now specifically, so what we see here is that you've got the second chart, the one down the bottom here, is that we're seeing that there is USA exports of helium, so the USA being number one producer. What we're seeing is the exports are dwindling, and what we're seeing is that the imports of helium into the USA are increasing. And so this is really reflecting the broader trend here that what we're seeing is that the USA does need to find additional sources of helium. And with the majority or the vast majority, so over 90% being a byproduct of natural gas, there's no flexibility in the system. And that's probably key, is that there is no flywheel. So there used to be the Federal Helium Reserve, which is the one where it was a storage of just helium. And so the world could say, okay, we want this much helium at any moment in time, and they would get it. That is not how it works at the moment. So at the moment, it is as a byproduct, it's like, okay, you can get your weekly or monthly delivery, but if you need more than that, the flexibility generally isn't there. And if you don't have a need for it, because it's a take or pay arrangement, chances are you'll be delivered it, paid for it, even if you don't need it. So what we're looking at with primary helium production is that how could we get this online and for it to become the flywheel in the system? And so really to bring stability to this very fragile supply chain for helium. And of course, with the scarcity of it, we've seen the price suitably reflected, which makes primary helium exploration viable, which over a decade ago it was not. And this is very much a new industry because of that increased demand and this increase in pricing. So zooming in on our Topaz project in Minnesota, we are in northern Minnesota, and we're not too far away from Lake Superior at the Great Lakes there. And we're just to the east of some of the major iron ore mines in North America. So you can see on the map here, I've got the North Shore Mine open cut pit. So resource extraction is not new to this location. What is new, though, is helium exploration. And quite frankly, it's new more or less everywhere. But with it, the government and the people of Minnesota have certainly been very welcoming. So much so that last year the state passed new legislation, new gas legislation that includes helium, and certainly gives us the support that we need to be able to move this project forward. So extremely grateful for that. For helium production, the key consumable that you need is electricity, and there is electricity nearby, so there's power lines close to our project. And to be able to get the product out, it's road network. You're not looking at pipelines, you're looking at putting out on containers, so liquid helium containers. And so that road infrastructure is in place as well. So it really is a prime location and in the largest market. So, world-class discovery. So here we have a list of North American states and provinces, and with what we drilled last year, we got up to 14.5% helium. To put that into context, we can see here that out of all the wells drilled in other states and provinces, what we drilled in Minnesota is the highest. So the highest concentration seen. So helium is different, say, from natural gas. Natural gas, you get natural gas or no natural gas, whereas helium is all about concentration. So you could think of it a bit like hard rock mining or gold, grams per ton. For us, it's about percentage concentration. And so getting up to double-digit concentration has many, many benefits. So the biggest two are the overall gas in place, so the amount of gas that you need to find in the ground, which is a mixture, a blend of various gases, is less than, say, if it was 1% or 0.5% helium. So the overall amount of gas that you need to substantiate going to production is less. The other thing is you have a benefit when it comes to processing. So the higher the concentration, the less gas that needs to be processed, and should have a positive effect on your operational costs and your operational expenditure there as well. So what we have is we use the group Sproul to conduct a resource estimation based on that one well from last year. I have to emphasize on one well. And so we've got a P50, so prospective resource here of 0.4 billion cubic feet. So to put that in perspective, the world currently uses 6 billion cubic feet of helium per annum. But off to a great start with just one well drilled. And so then we have CO2 as well that we are looking to sell as a byproduct. And there is certainly significant demand. And then Sproul in their report, they put in here saying chance of commerciality. It's fairly high for an early stage project with a value of 0.65 out of 1. So 65% chance of commerciality with only one well drilled. So obviously, it's not just us that thinks that we're off to a good start. So here we are. So there are a few different helium companies out there. How do you compare apples with apples? It is difficult to do. There is different data that comes out. But one thing that is quite straightforward to give you an initial sort of feel for it is the potential production. And so flow rate. So last year, our flow rates that we calculated was 821,000 cubic feet per day, with a helium concentration in the range of 8.7 to 14.5. And taking that, its potential values of 71,000 to 119,000 cubic feet per day. And once again, off the one well. So one easy metric to look at. But now going on, this is what we drilled last year, which is the blue, and the red is what we drilled just the other month. So with Jetstream number 1, we've now deepened it down significantly to go through the entirety of the interpreted reservoir. And nearby to it, we drilled Jetstream number 2. And so the image that we're looking at here, this cross-section, is a seismic velocity map. And basically, green is good. Green means that the velocity of the seismic waves is slower than, say, where it is red, where the speed is higher. And what we find is that correlates with where we're seeing gas in the wells. So this passive seismic technique that we've utilized, which has got effectively no footprint at surface, is very cost effective, cheap to deploy, and gather data quickly and real time, has really worked extremely well for us. And so we've drilled these two wells. They've gone down here, and they both recorded helium coming to surface during drilling. And so we're seeing multiple percent helium coming up. But whilst drilling, the gas that's encountered in the well is also mixed with the air that we breathe. And so they're always contaminated and diluted. But still, to see multi-percent level coming up is extremely encouraging and showing us that we're onto something potentially quite good. So what we have now is that we have the testing to come with these wells. So we have a cleanup that is soon to commence. And then we have the pressure testing and the flow testing to come. So for those of you aware, I've been reading our announcements. So that work is going to be conducted shortly. and we'll be providing a update to the market via a news release, giving exact dates when they're in hand, but not too much longer to wait. And then after that, we'll then be looking at a resource update and then looking at project economics. So for the first time in the public domain there, looking at, okay, what is the production potential of the Topaz project and how soon can we accomplish that? And on the subject of production, what we have done is we've signed an agreement with Chart Industries. And this is an agreement for engineering studies, design, feasibility and sensibility testing, and then ultimately fabrication of a facility to produce helium and CO2. So Chart is a company that will not have an interest in the gas itself. They would purely make us something which is fit for purpose for our project and then effectively sell it to us. But they really are a leading company for this. Most of the major gas and oil companies use Chart equipment. They're more or less the gold standard, and work across with hydrogen, helium, natural gas, CO2, all the industrial gases. But also what's very pleasing is that to keep it in the state, is that one of the largest fabrication facilities for Chart is in the state of Minnesota and only a couple of hour drive from our project. So we've got fast growing demand for helium. So the US helium reserves shrinking. Onshoring of manufacturing as well is particularly semiconductors, and of which already the state of Minnesota has multiple semiconductor fabrication facilities as well. It really does, and with talk of tariffs out there, and it's a commodity that doesn't like to travel either. It does, after a while, leak through its containers. So really, to have something in the USA is crucial. So we firmly believe that we have the right project in the right jurisdiction, and more technical applications for it coming as well. So really, I think I've just gone over 15 minutes there, so I've rushed through it. What I'll do is I'll leave it on this slide here, which is our contact details. So you have here an email address. If you send an email to that, it'll come directly through to myself and my colleagues, but there's also multiple other channels to reach us on. I firmly encourage you, if you do have questions, to ask them now, or if we don't have time, please contact us via one of these methods. So, Sarah, over to you.
Many thanks. Lovely to see how shiny Chart's livery was on its vehicle there. I want to talk a bit more about this relationship with Chart, because Chart makes what you're extracting, producing fit for purpose, and then they sell it to you. And then who are you going to sell it on to? Are you going to sell it to the state of Minnesota if it doesn't travel well?
Well, actually, with Chart, it's just they're purely building facilities. So that would be something that Pulsar would ultimately be acquiring, paying for, and we would own it. So it would be our product going into our plant. It's just that Chart would be the manufacturer. But in terms of the ultimate, who would be the ones that would be looking to purchase product? What we'd be looking at is certainly for the beginning would be some of the bulk users of helium. So this would be for fabrication of semiconductors, for MRI scanners, for space launch. There's some of the big obvious ones. There's also some independent distributors there as well, so you can take care of the small scale gaseous helium, so the cylinders that we may see at hospitals and so on. So to be able to sell to them as well. So there's multiple potential clients.
So I've just had a rather technical question come in, and I'm going to share this with everybody, and I'm probably going to have to speak very slowly. I need you to unpick this for me, please, Thomas. It says, what is the significance of the wellhead pressure readings released, and are the numbers of 122 PSIG, pounds per square inch gauge, and 151 indicative of a similar flow rate being achievable to the original Jetstream 1 rate of 820 MCF?
Well done, Sarah. That was a tricky one. But yes, MCF, so 1,000 cubic feet. So what we see is that, with the pressures, we're definitely encouraged by that. So it's in the range of what we drilled last year. And to have those pressures when we know that the wells require cleanup, So by cleanup, what I mean is that there's drill finds down there, so effectively dust from the drilling where the rock was broken up, and it's that needs to be removed. So to see those pressures and actually how quickly those pressures build up is very encouraging. So it would be in the range of, therefore, the flow rate that we received last year. Well, we've gone down deeper. We've seen that beyond the reservoir that we drilled last year, we see that we've intersected other zones of helium, and we know that because we were getting the helium coming up to surface that we reported. So I am encouraged by it. Am I going to say if it's going to be better or worse? Let's see, but certainly everything that we've seen so far seems very encouraging.
So a supplementary question from the same person who sent the very technical question: what is the expected flow rate you'd like to see achieved from each well, even as a broad range?
What would I like to see? Well, look, we achieved 821,000 last year. We've more or less doubled the well. So I would like to see, I think anything, if we could get over 1 million cubic feet, for a well, that would be a phenomenal achievement, considering the high concentration of helium there. I mean, already from what we can see is that before deepening, with the initial results that we got, it was Jetstream #1 was one of the most prolific, if not top 3 helium wells ever drilled in history. So if we can, repeat and better that, I'll be extremely happy, I must admit. So not too much longer to wait.
And same question where concentration's concerned. What average concentration would you like to see, again, even as a broad range?
Well, look, considering that other companies have gone into production with significantly less than what we've seen. So we've seen companies go into production or attempt to go into production with 0.5% helium, 1% helium, and that's their primary product, nothing else. So if we can get, that 14.5% that we recorded, or even, anything north of 5%, quite frankly, is phenomenal. Yeah, look, we know that we're in a high concentration helium system here. We know that it's not a hydrocarbon area. We know that there's no water down there. So really the fundamentals of the geology in the well are excellent. And we don't, with the flow testing that we did last year, we weren't seeing any radical changes either in the helium concentration. So yeah.
So I want to talk to you about public administration in the US, because externally, Trump and the rest of the world, he ping-pongs on his executive orders and his tariff mandates. But what's it like actually working in the US? Is public administration stable, or are you seeing sort of various in-country tariffs that might impact you, changing from 1 week or 1 month to the next?
No, for us, to be honest, there has been no impact on us. So, if anything, the support has only increased. So, being in Minnesota now for a number of years, it's been incredibly welcoming, supportive, local industry and government level as well. So, at the state and the federal level. So, we've had all forms of politicians come to site in every walk of life, and local local stakeholders as well. So we've really worked hard on that relationship, and very happy with how that's progressed. In terms of the fundamentals of the project itself, so we use local workforce, so we're not importing anything from abroad, be it equipment or personnel. So we're very much US centric. And then, otherwise it's we own the land where we are, so the surface rights are actually owned by Pulsar. So it's we're not operating on federal or state land. So that gives us, certainty to move forward as well. And now with the new legislation from the state of Minnesota that only came out last year, and the opening up soon of the state lands for helium exploration and development, I must admit our experience has been continually good in the US.
And in terms of that land that you own, do you own that land in perpetuity?
We do, yes. We can put a nice log cabin on there one day.
Very, very good. Right, some macro questions for you. What are the current market conditions for helium across the defense industries, since war seems to be dominating the headlines on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's an unfortunate application, isn't it? Yeah, look, with it, as with defense, a lot of it is very hush hush. We don't hear many of the details of it. But what we do become aware of is that certainly with drones, drone applications, that there's a helium use there. So they seem to be using that for testing, quite a lot of helium. But now, as I guess warfare becomes more high tech, it's less about jet engines. It's more about computing power and satellites. And really, that's where the semiconductors come in. So that's the big one. So leak testing for things, including batteries, lithium batteries, and so on. But the big one is computer chips. And so security for defense, I can only imagine that the US would want to shore that up even further than they perhaps already have.
So finally, Thomas, if there's peace on Earth, it's not just the defense industry, but the robotics boom that is relying on helium as well. And of course, robotics increasingly used in medicine and surgical procedures.
Yeah, look, a big application is healthcare, and so that's a really nice one to be associated with. So, MRI scanners, I've had an MRI, and I'm very grateful that technology exists. And so that's a huge consumer of helium for breathing gases as well. That uses a lot. And then for in terms of robots, and so we can all be lazy and live our lives on the sofa at the beach. I mean, it seems to be coming, doesn't it? But with AI and the computing power there, once again, it comes back to semiconductors and the computer chips. So we don't see any real let up in demand there. So for everything that we can think of, from deliveries to new forms of transportation, to space, to satellites, to computers. Computer I'm talking to you on now, everything. As you said at the very beginning, it's the commodity we never knew that we relied upon.
Many thanks. What a lovely way to end. Thomas Abraham James, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Sarah, and to everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you. And to the audience, I can tell you that Thomas is highly communicative. So I hope you managed to take down the contact details that he put up on screen there. And not to worry, because we will be putting this webinar on our YouTube channels and various other platforms, so you can watch again at your leisure. So next up, it's Eurasia Mining. This is the palladium, platinum, rhodium, iridium and gold miner. It has assets in Russia at a time that the US is showing strategic interest in critical minerals in the Russian Arctic. And Eurasia Mining has been there for quite some time. So it's listed in London. It is planning to have a dual listing on the Astana International Exchange in Kazakhstan. I'm delighted to be joined by Executive Chair Christian Schaffalitzky, who joins us now. A very warm welcome to you, Christian.
Thank you very much. I will just put up the first slide before I start speaking to you. That is the wrong slide. Just a moment.
That's okay. You're giving us a sneak preview.
Is that the right one?
So yes, we can see it. I think we just haven't got it in the slideshow. There we go. You've done it. You've cracked it, Christian. And with that, I shall let you take center stage.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Today I'm following up on a webinar which we had some time ago, so a few weeks ago, where I spoke in general about the corporate activities of our company, and we spoke about our assets. I answered a lot of questions. So I thought I would do something completely different today, and that is remind everybody what it is that we have in Russia and why are we so tenaciously working to make sure that we get value for all of us. And probably something which we haven't stressed enough in the past is how advanced our major projects are in the Kola Peninsula in the Russian Arctic. This first slide, by the way, shows as a background is a rather poor image of the West Kytlim mining area, which has been rehabilitated after, well, this area was completed some 6 years ago. And you can see that there's very little trace of our mining activities. And that's what we argue is that for West Kytlim in particular, that our mining activities have a very low environmental impact. So moving then to the main assets of the company, which are in the Kola Peninsula up in the Russian Arctic, we have got a suite of metals, which is nickel, copper, a little bit of cobalt, and PGMs, platinum group metals, which together form a very valuable asset in itself. But more importantly, the nickel and copper in particular are key to the new metals required for the battery industry, and in particular for copper, the whole infrastructure required for electronics, for just power lines even. A lot more power lines are being built with the diversified grid that is happening all over the world with renewables, etc. And it's important to look at the metals in that context. And we had focused on the Kola Peninsula because it had a history of base metal mining and indeed of PGMs. And the PGMs we started on, and then the opportunity came to acquire the adjacent ground, which again I will touch on momentarily. Just to recap on the details of the industry, basically nickel and copper are two of the primary metals that are supporting industrial activities worldwide. And I would like to focus particularly on copper, where there was a huge boom of copper production based on the Chilean deposits, which were worked basically from the late 60s through the 70s and to date. However, they have now, none of those very large open pit resources have been replaced. And there is little doubt that in the future, we're going to need every ton of copper we can find. And in nickel, it's less obvious, but that's because, again, the industry has changed in that there are two types of nickel, sulfide and lateritic nickel. And the sulfide metal is also, if you like, a declining resource in the planet, mainly because exploration had gone through such a long fallow period. It's still going on, in fact, today. Very few people are doing proper grassroots exploration, which was the main activity that I joined the industry in the 70s, where we were all doing lots of it. And today we're resting on the laurels of the people who worked in the 70s. And really, there is a need now for significant exploration required for sulfide nickel and copper in general. Looking at Russia, we're up in the Arctic, in particular in the Kola Peninsula, which is adjacent there to Finland. You can see it on the map here. And but largely also, if you go eastwards to the Norilsk area, that together with what we have in the Arctic, in our part of the Arctic, you have significant copper reserves, where Russia is number 4 in PGMs, and number 1 in palladium, number 2 in platinum after South Africa. Nickel reserves number 3, and cobalt number 2. So basically, the key metals that are required going forward for the modern industry, modern industrial demand, is a very important area, and it's one of the reasons I think why shall we say, modern geopolitical developments are focused on trying to sort out the Ukraine crisis and move on, because simply to have such a large part of the planet as not available for mining or exploration or trading is a big problem for the demand of Western industry in particular. To remind you then about what are we on about in Eurasia. Basically, we have the Monchetundra open pit assets, which are permitted and ready to go. And then together with that, though, what has changed everything was the discovery or the addition of the NKT area, which is immediately northeast of the West Nitis open pit area. And there we have really large-scale assets to be developed. But of course, in timing terms, they're behind the advanced and completed Monchetundra feasibility studies and permitting for mining licenses. However, we are expecting to complete the NKT permitting, the application for mining licenses later this year, and then it'll have caught up with Monchetundra. And one of the questions that I keep getting more recently, and I haven't answered properly, but let me do it now. The DFS is in a way partly a historical document because it needs to be rebuilt together with the NKT assets. And so this will be a combined development. There's no question about that. And therefore, we need to make significant changes to the development of the project to incorporate the base metals that are in the NKT asset while the Monchetundra license is largely PGMs with byproduct copper and nickel. The life of mine we have here is 15 years, but as you'll see in a moment, that will change, and I'll show you why momentarily. A lot of people have been asking what's tier one. If you Google tier one, just to ask what is a tier one nickel mine about, you'll get this kind of page, and you'll see Eurasia Mining actually gets mentioned in the context of its NKT project. Basically, it's a large, low-cost nickel deposit with a long life, considered to be company making. And this is exactly why a company like Eurasia concentrated on trying to develop these assets going forward. Just having a look now at the district, you'll see, if you can see my cursor, I hope you can. This is the West Nitis and Loipishnoon permitted open pit deposits ready for development, which together are called Monchetundra. Then we have license areas which are the Monchetundra flanks, and in particular then the additional NKT in blue here, which was subject to the Wardell Armstrong early feasibility study prior to our more detailed work. And the combination of everything within that red area is what would be developed as a single mine. Obviously phased, but basically the single mine. A few things to point out is that we have two major power lines literally running down this main road here and in this valley. And that means that the area has really good infrastructure. That's the main road from Murmansk to St. Petersburg. And it's a dual carriageway for part of the road. And then you have the city of Monchegorsk in here with a nickel refinery located right beside NKT. In fact, the early NKT mining was what created this development in the first place. But the mine closed without having completed its reserves and resources because it was a different type of deposit which was being exploited within this license at the time. Nowadays, we can look at much more lower grade ores that are bulk mined. In the past, they were just mining out veins. So the reason I show this slide, apart from the infrastructure I've just touched on, is that we have within the immediate district a number of other deposits. You've seen us write about Nude, where the joint venture is on hold, but basically it's our information and the potential joint venture is available for sale together with our assets over on the west side of this district. And then on top of that, there are a number of other deposits that are fairly well understood, but which obviously could be developed in the future. And as the person as we expect to be the first company to have a operating mine and processing plant, we're well placed as first mover within this district with a very long potential history possible in the development. This just summarizes the resources that we have in our reserves and resources, which we have within our license areas. And just pointing out that of the pure EV demand metals, Nornickel and Eurasia Mining are the two quoted public companies with assets in Russia, which are positioned to take advantage of the future demand for the metals that we all expect are going to be required. This is a historical slide. Our capitalization as of the 20th of May is shown on the left-hand side, all in US dollars. The market capitalization in the end of 2020 had reached 1.6 billion US dollars. The NPV on the NKT deposit alone, estimated by Wardell Armstrong in 2021, was approximately 1.7 billion dollars. Research by H.C. Wainwright, who were the people who raised us a lot of money in the past before February 2022. In fact, this particular research report came out almost within the time or just when the war started in Ukraine. And unfortunately, that is what caused the collapse in our asset value, as we all know. And then finally, they have the ACF report, which also published, was based on projections of what we could be worth in the future. But basically, I feel that we are sitting here working on this project simply because we do not want to lose the clear value that sits in the ground within our asset portfolio. So On that note, I'll finish speaking. As I said, I just wanted to recap to remind shareholders, of which I'm sure there are a few online, of what it is that we're working on. As I said, we're expecting to try and get our NKT project completed this year and added to the Mocha Tundra to make a combined feasibility study for the development of both projects at the same time. Some people have said, what about the Sino-Steel contract? And I would say, yes, perhaps, but one of the things we have to keep in mind is that the war is not over yet, and we have to make sure that whatever we do fits into the geopolitical climate that's available for us. And in the meantime, there is no question that the best way for us to get asset value is a sale of the assets themselves. But we will, of course, keep the option open of developing the project ourselves. That's it, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Christian, I'm sensing a reluctance to sell the assets. And is that because the assets remain exciting to you and that actually the business climate in Russia is softening, it's becoming more welcoming, and sanctions are soon to be lifted?
Well, we don't know what's going to happen geopolitically, but I would say that that is correct. Basically, we are feeling partly re-energized by the possibility that we could take the lead on the project. But at the moment, I can't possibly say that. I have to wait for other people to sort out the geopolitical situation. But at the end of the day, one way or the other, we're going to get value for this. This is what our objective has been for years, really. And obviously, and I said this before at the other webinar, when the Ukraine crisis began, we went literally overnight from a seller's market to a buyer's market. We had a lot of people interested in the projects, shall we say, Western companies who simply could not respond immediately after that event. And that has been something we've had to live with. And as I said, the main thing we've done is we've kept the projects going. We've made sure that the assets are maintained in good standing and that they're available, that they have been continued to develop in order to maintain their value. We've done that, and that's the best we could do.
Okay, understood. Now, I don't mean to be rude, but for a while it's appeared as though the company's been dormant and there's been a lot of inertia. But you have raised money successfully. You're capitalized, I think, until this time next year. So what is that going to? Is that developing those assets that excite you, or is the biggest cost at the moment storing the concentrate that you've currently got there?
No, it's a sort of bimodal activity, really. In other words, we are working hard on making sure that the Russian activities are self-sustaining, and we've achieved that. And that that they can continue to work and develop the new projects, as well as based on the income and the assets that are the asset that is being mined in the Urals. Meanwhile, though, we have a lot of things to do, if you like, offshore, to put it crudely, not in Russia. And in particular, of course, we're looking at our secondary listing in Astana. And the reason for that is that there is a big chunk of our former shareholders who are not, unfortunately, served by the London market. And we were being approached by various, shall we say, investors with that in mind. What can we do about that? And what we're doing is exactly that. We're listing in Astana with that objective. And that's one of the questions that I've also been getting is there a prospectus and so on? Not exactly. We will be publishing what is basically a 7-page almost box-ticking document that's required by the Astana Exchange, which will be published both in London and in Astana simultaneously. And but it's not a prospectus in the sense that it provides it's largely based on last year's annual report. So there won't be any new improved information. That will come out in our own annual report, obviously, which will be due in June this year.
Okay. There is a question has come through about what's the purpose of having an office in Japan, and what are the staff doing there to sort of increase shareholder value?
Well, the office itself is definitely, shall we not close, but certainly no longer a major priority, because we're not developing that the hydrogen assets which we had planned for Eastern Russia. That was the main reason why we had and also with Japanese interest, in fact. So that was the reason it was established in the first place, again, before the crisis in Ukraine. And so we have had to go back to our basic assets, which is what we're talking about. And however, the directors there have been really helpful and very useful. In particular, they have been adding a lot of value for us in the sale process. And you know, that's all I can say about it at the moment. I'm really glad to have them in the team.
Right. Okay, so they're value add. Now, but is there a crisis where 10% of the company's entire share capital is concerned? One person is asking about the Quailed court case and disputed ownership of 10% of the share capital. Should shareholders be concerned about that?
I don't see why. I mean, there are always rows between shareholders themselves. You know, I mean, that's nothing to do with me personally. And the company is entirely neutral on this argument. We don't really mind. I mean, obviously, it means that shareholding is frozen in a sense. You know, that they obviously can't buy or sell until the court cases are resolved. But as far as the company is concerned, we're neutral. But we want to be sure that when we were being asked to make a decision about the ownership of those shares, that we did not complete a transaction with the wrong owner, and that was what the problem was originally.
Okay, understood. So how confident are you that you'll get a secondary listing underway soon in 2025 and have a good team?
Yes, we're still on target for the end of this quarter.
The end of this quarter, very, very good.
That's the plan. Yeah.
And just remind your UK-based investors how they will benefit by you having a dual listing.
Well, hopefully, if it works well, which is our objective, because we'll be marketing in a completely different environment, is that we will be increasing the liquidity of the shares, which, by the way, is not bad. I mean, you know, compared to some AIM companies, they're excellent liquidity, and so we're expecting that will improve, and in addition add further, shall we say, interested shareholders as opposed to just investors for the sake of the share price. I mean, you know, investors who understand the strategic importance of what it is we're doing as a company, which, if you like, has got a bit lost because of the crisis. I mean, that's the reason I gave these slides today, to remind people why it is that this asset is really interesting and exciting.
Yeah, and you know, yeah, if, as I said to Thomas, if there is peace on Earth, would you immediately see financiers, institutions, off-takers knocking on your door?
Well, I mean, based on the appetite beforehand, I'd have to say yes.
Yeah.
I mean, before the crisis, I'd have to say yes.
So here we are. I mean, you and I are speaking virtually at the moment, but who is banging Eurasia Mining's drum in Russia? Who are the company's ambassadors who are making sure that you're relevant and yeah, that you're relevant in Russia?
We're blessed with having teams of a lot of our staff have been in the company a very long time, and it's clear that we've managed to maintain all our licenses in good standing. We've never had a license cancelled. We've never had any difficulties with our tenure. Basically, everybody's doing their job properly, and we are in good standing with the government. That's all I can say on that matter, and that is as good as it gets in Russia.
So I know that a lot of shareholders would I mean, you've appeared a couple of times within sort of 4 weeks. Shareholders are enjoying seeing you virtually. Is there any chance that they'll get to see you in person? What about an AGM?
At the moment, yeah. I mean, the real difficulty is that, you know, we are conscious of the fact that we are internationally spread as a board, but I haven't made a decision about that. So thank you for the suggestion, Sarah. I'll think about it.
Very good. Right. So just to recap, because I had 4 sheets of A4 of questions for you, mainly to do with the sale and frustration that assets weren't being sold. But from your response to my first question, it sounds as though a sale isn't a priority, but the development of these juice.
Oh, I wouldn't say that now. Sorry, Sarah, I wouldn't say that. I'd say sale is a priority, but we are keeping in mind, in view of the changing geopolitical environment, that it could be possible for us to do otherwise.
Right, understood. So what would you like to have achieved, even under these sanction-filled conditions? What would you like Eurasia Mining to have achieved by the end of this calendar year?
I would like to have created the value that we lost before the Ukraine crisis. That's the simple answer. In whatever way it happens. Let me just say that I've been working on these projects since, well, more seriously since 2003. And, you know, I originally selected the Kola Peninsula as my first new project when I came into the company. So it's my baby in that sense. And, you know, I really think it would be nice to see the crystallization of that value as soon as possible, basically. And that's really what we're working to do.
You're a seasoned businessman, and I'm just wondering, is this the project that has given you sleepless nights?
Obviously, since the Ukraine crisis, it has. But at the same time, you know, I had another project which I often laugh about. But basically, it's my first time as a geologist. I went to London on a roadshow as a youngish geologist for another company, and we arrived on Black Monday, 1987, in London. And by lunchtime, we realized it was pointless to talk to anybody in the city because all the screens were red and nobody was listening. So we went for lunch instead. And so that would have been my worst moment by far. You know, even though I was only a peripheral player, it was really educational. You can only do what you can do at the end of the day.
Exactly. Yes, I remember that. The screens were red, but the pubs were full.
Correct.
There's a silver lining. Christian, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. You've answered nearly all the questions, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. And don't be a stranger. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
And thank you to the audience as well. Now, just to let you know that there is a poll which is incoming, and I need you to do a quick response to this before the poll appears on our screen. I just want to give a huge thank you to all our speakers and Rob Double, the technical director at London Broadcast, Paul Cornelius, Kat Perez, Dave Danu, and the production team behind this webinar platform. And thank you, of course, to our hosts, London South East and focusIR. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Details to be announced. Take care, cheerio, and please do fill in this poll. Thank you very much indeed.